god, this video is going to be so long, but I promise all of this is really valid, and if you are thinking about moving abroad, like, please watch this, because I think so many of these things are not mentioned. Good morning. I am currently in Finland. If you're following me on Instagram, you'll probably know that. It is 8:30. It is Saturday the 25th. How did I forget that? It's my birthday tomorrow. So yeah, it's Saturday the 25th. I am just about to go and, first of all, do something about this situation. But also I'm going to go and pack because I'm going to Helsinki today. I'm going to be visiting some friends, and well, that came out really weird, some friends. And yeah, I hope to show you a little bit of Helsinki as well. But at the same time, I do want to talk a little bit about something that people keep asking me about, which is moving abroad and working abroad. Because I think there are several things that you don't really hear talked about, no one really mentions, but like once you actually do live and work abroad, is quite obvious in a sense, or at least I think you'll experience it. And so that's what I'll be talking about today. And if people are still confused, I'm originally from Finland. I am not Irish, which is a misconception that I get on Instagram all the time. No, I'm not Irish. I've lived in Ireland for 2 years, but that's it. I'm originally from Finland, Southwest Coast, and yeah, that's about it. I'm gonna go and do something about this and pack up a bit, and I'll talk to you in a second because I think this is gonna be a really interesting video. Stay tuned. Right, so situation sort of better, but what I wanted to talk about is, I mean, I know it's a little bit of an odd topic probably, speaking about moving and living abroad in the middle of a pandemic, where I don't know if a lot of people are considering it, but a lot of people are doing it. And I think we're still looking into the future and being like, this is not gonna last forever. People still have dreams, and I get a lot of questions about this, so I figured I'd film a video and talk very candidly about what it is like moving abroad to work. And I want to be really real about it. This is not meant to be a downer video by any means, but I at least want to give you a fuller picture than what you maybe see on Instagram about people living abroad, and it might feel like everyone's living this super glamorous lifestyle, but that's not really it. So that's also why I want to have like a one-to-one chat about what it's really like, what struggles you might be facing if you do this. That's what I want to talk about. So the first time I moved abroad was 2015, and that was when I was a student. So I'm actually going to be able to tell you a little bit about the difference of moving abroad as an exchange student and moving abroad for work. And it's one thing that I really do want to also address because I think it's definitely different. And I moved to Montreal in 2015. I was there for about half a year for one semester, and yeah, it was an absolutely amazing experience, and that's what inspired me to actually move abroad for work in the end. But yeah, it's a very different experience, and I've now lived in Dublin for about 2 years, and yeah, it's completely changed my life, obviously, but in so many ways, and that's what I want to talk about. So number one, obviously, what I want to talk about is that it is not the same as going on exchange when you actually work abroad. And I'm trying to explain this in a way that makes sense, especially if you haven't been on exchange. But a lot of the times when people go on exchange, they know that it's going to be temporary. You probably are going between like 4 to 12 months, and you usually kind of save a lot of money, and you're not necessarily working there, so you're going there for an experience, and to experience a culture, to experience studying in a different country, living in a different country, but it's not permanent. So you also kind of experience everything through this like temporary lens. So you kind of look at things like in a very, and I'm sorry to say this, in a YOLO way. And like, that's all well and good. It's perfectly fine. I'm not saying that going on exchange and spending 6 months wanting to experience a place and experience as much as possible wherever you are, because then you're going back, like, that's totally fine. Like, I did that. But at the same time, when you're moving abroad for work and you think about that as sort of a more permanent solution rather than just going and coming back in less than a year, it's a very different lens that you take on how you live your life and how you set up your life. Because like, you go on an exchange and you probably aren't going to have your own bank accounts, you're not thinking about taxation in that country, you don't, like, none of these things matter because they're not something that you need to think about. There's a lot of things that just generally aren't part of that life. And so I wanted to address that first. It's not like going on exchange. You're not going to live like you're on exchange. Yeah, generally not the same thing at all. And number 2 is it's an opportunity to live lighter. And what I mean by this is that when you move abroad, obviously you need to figure out what you need to move with you. And I have friends that have basically taken their entire life and every single possession that they have with them. But I think that's so, I don't know, like for me, I moved to Ireland with like 2 suitcases and my hand luggage, and I brought like my winter jacket or something with me after, and I love that. Like I love the fact that I don't have this massive amount of stuff with me, because it means that I can go and leave and move like very easily, whereas in Finland I owned my own furniture, I owned like everything in my apartment, and that meant that moving had to happen with like a van and like several people, whereas now if I want to move, I probably now have like maybe 3 or 4 suitcases worth of things, so I can take like a couple of taxis to like between places and actually get everything sorted. So I don't know, like for me that's been huge. Like it's still important to feel at home and enjoy the things you own, but at the same time you probably don't need everything that you have, and it's changed my perspective to thinking more about what I want in my life long term rather than just buying like things that I use like once or twice, because I also don't have the space for it. I live in a room with 2 flatmates in the same apartment, and it's not a huge apartment, so it's not like I have massive storage either. So that's one. It's an opportunity to live lighter and really think about like what you need in your life. Number 3 is that you'll learn a lot about your thinking and your beliefs. And I think probably the most important one for this is you'll realize that what you thought is normal is only normal where you probably lived before. And you just get this whole perspective of like, oh, there are so many different ways of doing things, and the one that you're used to isn't necessarily the right one, or there probably isn't a right one. And things are just done in many different ways, and you just need to kind of get used to it. But you probably haven't even thought about the default things that you've experienced in the past being default or being something that isn't done the same way everywhere. So I think it brings to the surface what you believed to be just usual and normal. And so that's one. But that kind of brings me to a point that I would love to make to anyone who's considering moving abroad or maybe has moved abroad and isn't necessarily happy, because I realized that this particular bringing your beliefs to the surface doesn't always register with people like that and makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And in some people, you create this resistance to the way things are done in wherever you moved. And I'm sorry to say this, but I think a lot of people have a shit attitude when they move abroad. And I've met a lot of people that do nothing but complain about everything in their destination country. And they compare, I think this is the worst part, is that they compare it to where they lived before. And you don't go into a country to change the goddamn country. You go there to experience a new place, to assimilate to the culture, to learn about how people live in that country, and to someone else's home, basically. You're not going into someone's home and being like, I don't like how you do things here, change it. No. You go into their home and you do things like they do things. Like, of course, you can try and influence, people and how things are done in a society, but at the same time, going to a place and just complaining because things aren't done the same way as they were where you were. Why the hell did you leave? I don't understand that. I think it's making a lot of people really unhappy living abroad. And I have so many people that I've met that cannot stop complaining about things in Ireland or Dublin. And part about it is, like, I understand if you're annoyed about something and you rant a little bit, but when it's constantly the comparison of, oh, this is done so much better where I'm from or where I lived before. And I've done this a couple of times, but there are people that generally make themselves so unhappy with it that they eventually leave, and I guess in many ways they probably should if they do this. But like, you're never going to start building your life and your social circle, and you're never going to start building your life in the country if all you are doing is in your head living in that country that you're from still and just comparing. Like, you need to accept the fact that you are now in a new country and they do things differently, and some things are better, some things are worse. That's always the case. You are going to hate something and you're going to love something, but you did in the past as well. You're just like, your brain is just making everything back home seem so much more perfect. And I don't know, like, this became like a huge rant for me now, but like, it annoys me so much because I think so many people could be happy living where they are in terms of living abroad or working abroad, but they just make it so hard for themselves and they don't even realize it. I knew someone quite closely who ended up moving back to their home country because and I think this was a massive part, is that they never started to build their life because all they could think is that everything's so much better at home. So they ended up moving back home, and I hope they're happy. But at the same time, I wish people would give them themselves the chance to actually experience things with an open mind. But yeah, rant over. You learn a lot about your beliefs, and this is my belief. Don't come at me, but it's true. It's a lot of people do this. But yeah, let's move on, because like that took a while. Number 4, and this is something that I think is mentioned, but not to an extent that it probably should be, which is you are going to be going outside of your comfort zone, especially in the beginning, a lot. And it has to do with the fact that things aren't done the same as they probably were where you were from. But what I don't think gets mentioned is that it can be exhausting. Like, absolutely fucking exhausting. I'm sorry, pardon my French, but sometimes, especially in the beginning, having to figure everything out from the start is just tiring. Like, if you didn't know how to ask for help before, with this experience, you'll have to. And it's a good thing though. It's great, but at the same time, you'll be faced with a lot of new local systems, a lot of things that you didn't know, a lot of things that are done very differently, and you're just gonna have to like ask people for help, rely on others, and it can be hard. You'll get through it, but like, I think it needs to be put out there. It's not just uncomfortable, but it's actually really tiring. And so give yourself some slack if you have moved abroad and you're experiencing this, and it's not just unicorns and rainbows and all the good stuff. But just give yourself a couple months. It'll get better, I swear. Number 5, moving abroad, even for work, can be pretty expensive. It depends obviously where you're moving, but generally moving all of your stuff, depending on how much you're taking, is going to cost you probably extra, because most plane tickets, for example, aren't giving you multiple suitcases, or if you want to ship anything, it's going to cost something. If you're lucky, your company is going to pay for it, but they might only reimburse you and not pay for it up front. So I would say the expensive part a lot of the times, if your company is paying for things, is still with like fronting the cost yourself. It's things like your rental deposit. It might be temporary housing that you need to find before you can actually find a place to live, which can be a massive cost depending on how long it generally takes to find a place in wherever you're moving. And like, all of these things can actually add up a lot, even if someone then reimburses you for it. Having saved money is actually quite important before you go, because you don't really always know which costs are coming to you and when you're getting reimbursed, if you are. So I kind of want to put that out there, that having some money saved up and like a good nest egg before you go gives you a lot of peace of mind. Because, for example, for me, I had temporary housing from the company that I work for, but at the same time, I needed to extend my temporary housing because I couldn't find a place for 5 weeks. So imagine if you don't get temporary housing and it takes you 5 weeks to find a place, you are going to have to pay for that 5 weeks. And it might be really expensive, because obviously temporary things and short-term leases are generally more expensive than long-term ones. So just to put that out there, make sure that you're prepared and you're doing things in a smart way. And yeah, that's one. Number 6, and this is kind of just my theory, but I'm going to say that the length of your stay will impact your experience. And by this I mean that if you are planning on moving abroad for work, and I'm just going to talk about moving for work because I think it's more relevant. If you're a student and you're going for 6 months, that's similar but not the same. if you're going for like 1 or 2 years, you'll probably have more of that mentality of going on exchange and doing this for a while, and it's like a couple of years, and then you're going back and settling down somewhere. Whereas if you think you are not going back or not moving anywhere else, and like this is kind of, at least for now, where you're going to live, which is what I'm thinking about my living in Ireland. I don't have plans of moving anywhere. I don't know if I'm going to live there forever, probably not, but at the same time, it is for now for me. So I'm not thinking about going anywhere, which means that you make more of an effort, I think, to build your social circle, to make sure you feel at home, the way you pick your apartment or where you live, and how you set up everything for yourself in terms of like all the adulting things, like picking a good bank and making sure that you have a good relationship with them, and just setting up all of the things that you need for living somewhere for a while. And I think it definitely impacts like how you look at things and like what you accept for your life. Because if you think you're going to be somewhere for like maybe like a year and a half, it's a relatively short period of time and you're not going to need the same things, and that's completely fine. But I think having that in mind and making sure that you think about it, but at the same time, if you are going to stay for a longer period of time, I think one thing that I tend to make the mistake on is getting into the home mode a little too fast. So you're not a tourist in your home a lot of the times. And what that means is that you don't travel as much within the country. You just kind of don't, I guess, explore as much as you would if you were only staying for a little bit. So like there are sides to both ways, and there's no right way of doing it, but this is kind of like something that I don't think people are talking about as much. Anyway, number 7, and it gets mentioned, but I think it also doesn't get talked about to an extent that it is true, which is maintaining relationships in multiple countries is incredibly hard. And I don't necessarily mean romantic relationships, just friendships, people you know, and how much that can suck. And this is probably like the toughest bit for me because I suck at keeping in touch. I'm an introvert. I hate calling people. I literally just feel like keeping in touch with a ton of people takes so much energy out of my day. And I know it's probably bad and I probably should do more. But it is how it is for me. And that extra effort that I need to make, it can be exhausting. And I think the hardest part about this is also that when you're in a different place than a lot of your friends and family, you're eventually going to miss things. Someone gets married and maybe you weren't able to actually travel to the wedding, or someone has a child. I don't know, like all of these big life events or birthdays or anything where you see like all of your friends gather together and you're not able to be there, and FOMO much, like those things suck. Like you can't be there for everything. And that's hard. And I would say to an extent you will get used to it. It's not the end of the world and you'll make new friends, but it is kind of almost like a growing apart experience in some cases. You will obviously have the friends that, or at least I have the friends that like it's always the same when we meet up again, but like you miss them. And that can suck more than you know. And I have people that I know that have eventually moved back to their home countries because they couldn't, like even if they went back quite frequently, they just couldn't do it. They missed everyone too much, and that's fine. But like it's a reality, and you know, the fact that it's hard doesn't mean that you made the wrong decision though. Moving abroad might still be a perfectly great decision for you, even if sometimes you end up being really emotional about the fact that you haven't seen your family in a while, your friends in a while, even if it sucks sometimes. And I just want to say that it doesn't mean you made a mistake. You'll know, I think you will know if you did. I think you will know if you don't think you are in the right place for you, but I think you should still give it a shot. Like especially in the beginning, it's harder than it is like 6 months from now. You can always think about it in a way that's like you can always go back, but like at least give it a chance, especially because you've come so far if you've already moved abroad. You never really know what's gonna happen. You might get stuck in a country thinking about this whole pandemic situation and everything, and it might be really hard. I couldn't travel to Finland for almost 6 months because you just couldn't really travel anywhere, which meant that if something happened at home, I could have probably taken a repatriation flight or something, but you never know what's gonna happen, and I think it's gonna make a lot of people think about things a little bit differently, but I would still say like it's not a bad choice to live abroad at all. Oh my god, this video is going to be so long, but I promise all of this is really valid, and if you are thinking about moving abroad, like please watch this, because I think so many of these things are not mentioned. And if you are liking this video at this point, please hit the subscribe button, click the thumbs up, ring the bell so you don't miss an upload. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you very much. On with the program. Number 8, and oh my god, this is like, it has to do with the other one, or the previous one, but making friends as an adult can be so hard. Especially for me, okay, for me this was easier because I moved to a company that is quite like young and with a lot of people that are similar minded to myself, but making friends outside of work, so wherever like I didn't know people before, oh my god, like it's like you have to justify, it's almost like dating, you need to justify to people like why they would want to spend time with you. And in a lot of places, Dublin included, Ireland included, I think a lot of people already have like their groups of friends, especially if you are not an expat and you live in the country. So it's almost like you need to tell them like why they should be spending time with you and not all of their other friends and whatever. Like it can be really frustrating sometimes, and it takes so much effort. And yeah, it's taken me such a long time to find friends outside of work and like keep those friends and meet up with them, and it's still hard. But if you've been on exchange and you've gone to like a university where you get this whole like group of other exchange students and it's like really easy to bond with them and all of this, like you might not understand what it's like when that doesn't get given to you. For me, even so, like I started with a ton of people at the same time, so like I still almost had a bit of that experience. But after that, having to build a social circle in a new country, like dude, it takes so much time and effort. Like I'm telling you, be prepared. And number 9 is going to be a short and sweet one, but it's a bit of a hassle. Like moving abroad is a hassle because like even just timing everything perfectly, like getting rid of your lease wherever you are currently and packing, and if you need to store anything, figuring out where you need to store it, or if you're going to just give away or sell away everything that you have. Like for me, I mean, I sold all my furniture, and so like for the last couple of nights I slept on just like a very bare mattress like in my apartment, because like I just wanted to get rid of it, but at the same time like getting it perfectly timed is really hard. Things that you don't think you need to do, like getting rid of your insurance or figuring out like banking and taxation and stuff like that you need to like sort out with your home country. Because like for me, for example, it's not like I'm just a tax resident in Ireland, I am partially tax responsible in Finland, which means that I don't pay taxes in Finland unless I'm making money in Finland. But at the same time, I still need to declare my income the year that I left and 3 years after. So like it's small things that just add up to like a bit of a hassle. But that's about that. Related though, number 10, you will have to learn how to adult again, which can be so weird because you thought you know how things work. You thought you know how taxation works. You thought you know how healthcare works. You thought you know where you go for a doctor or your dentist or everything. From like like you have to get like social security numbers and register for everything, and like everything that was so just worked in your country, you now have to put conscious effort into learning and knowing. I think it's also one of the most important things that you need to do when you move into a new country is to learn to adult, because I still have friends that I need to explain taxation to 2 years later that we actually moved into the country, and I'm like, should you not know this already? You're not here like for your first couple of months, like you've lived here for a while, like how is it that you don't know how all of these things work? I don't know how everything works, but like especially if you're planning to stay long term, like being very conscious of those like will save you money, will make your life easier, you're not gonna get any nasty surprises or anything. And yeah, it's just important, but I don't think you realize like how much there is that you knew in your home country that you now don't know in the new country where you're going. So that is one. That is definitely a big one. Number 11, it's still just everyday life. You have these glamorous, you know, IG photos from people that live abroad, and they're just like saying like how it's the most amazing thing, and it is. But it also, most of the time, it's literally just your everyday life. You go to work, you eat dinner, you come home, you see your friends, you hang out just as you would anywhere else, you maybe do a weekend trip every once in a while. But like most of the time, it's just like what you do on a daily basis if you work in any country. And it's not like, I mean, that's not very glamorous. It's kind of just basic. And people don't say it because it doesn't sound as like cool and fun, but that's like 90% of your time anyway. I mean, you can make it different, I guess, but like it is what it is. Like you're an adult in a different country and you're working there. So that's what it is like working abroad. It's working in a different country. A lot of people, I think, expect to travel a lot more, and I guess some do, but at the same time, there will be a point where you kind of settle down a little bit, and then it'll be exactly what you did in the past. If you were not a big traveler, I doubt you're going to become a big traveler. I haven't. Like, I like traveling, but at the same time, I enjoy living abroad more than I enjoy the travel aspects of like going into other countries. So I'll probably just end up like moving countries, traveling every once in a while, rather than living in one country and traveling all the time. Like that's probably how I'll do it. It's not how you probably will do it, but you are still going to be the same person. Like you will take your personality to the country that you now live in. It's still you. It's still your everyday you. I think that doesn't get talked about a lot, and I think it's hilarious, but that's it. Number 12, and you'll change. That's the thing. And it's a lot of times it's change that is hard to explain to anyone who hasn't experienced it before, which is why it's hard for me to talk about this in a way that makes sense if you haven't experienced living or working abroad. You change in relation to where you are, and you change in relation to that experience of building your life somewhere else. And for me, anytime I come back to my hometown or even Finland, I still feel fond of the places here. It almost feels like I no longer belong here. I think for some, it's a very sad feeling. For me, it's not a sad feeling. It's more like almost like a bit of nostalgia whenever I come back here. For me, it's kind of a happy feeling almost. Like I have so many places that I miss. So I also miss Montreal, and it's kind of still a home away from home. And I think it's a privilege to have so many places that I've been able to call home, and that nostalgia is more like a bit of happiness of I've had so many great experiences somewhere. But for some people it might sound offensive or insulting that I don't feel like I belong where my family lives, for example, but it's just how I feel. I think it's just the fact that your concept of home changes. I don't call my hometown here home. I call Dublin my home. Even Helsinki is probably more home for me than my hometown, even though my family lives here. It's not like my home is not people. Home is like where my everyday life is, like where my everyday social circle is. Yeah, where I just feel like this is where I belong. And right now it's not here. And that's completely fine. But I don't think a lot of people understand that. I think the best way to explain it is like your concept of home will change and how you relate to different places will change. And number 13, and this is the last one. I swear this is the last one. But please hear me out, because you might move abroad but you might not like it. And this is like, no one says this. Everyone's always like, it's so great and whatever, but like the fact is you might not like living abroad, and that's fine. Like it's okay. Like it's an experience. You're not going to enjoy all of the experience that you have in life. You might pick the wrong place or whatever, or you just might not like living somewhere else than where you're from, or away from family, or away from friends, or 1,000 different reasons that you might not like it. And that's fine. Like at that point, then at least you experience it, and you know that's not for you, or at least it's not for you at this time in your life. I always kind of would love to take into that context. We change over time, but it might not be for you, and that's okay. And admitting that is not some kind of a failure. Like you didn't fail if you moved abroad and you didn't enjoy it. It just means at least if you gave it a try. If you moved and like you were super negative about everything and like you didn't even try to enjoy it or experience things or see things and do it with an open mind, but if you did, no, it's just an experience, you know? You tried it. You were like, not for me, that's great, go back. It's not irreversible. I think a lot of people think that you move abroad and like that's it, like it's such a huge risk, it's such a like big leap and whatever. And I mean, it is a big leap, like let's face it, it is. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be permanent. It doesn't have to be irreversible. You can always go back if you don't like it. Like that's also the thing about people being very much like, oh, I could never. I'm like, why not? It's like, it could be like 6 months to a year of your life. If you don't like it, go back. But if you feel like it could be for you and it could be fun and it could be cool, you can try it. do it. Caveat, very privileged experience. If you have the chance and you can do it, but you're just too scared of doing it, think like, what's the worst case scenario in like the next 12 months? Like, is there a reason that you can't go back? Is there a reason that everything's gonna fall down if you don't like it or whatever? Like, probably not. So that's it. That concludes my things that people don't talk about moving abroad. This is a long video. It's a long ass video. If you've watched it all the way through, leave a comment down below. Let me know. This just needs to be talked about. It's just something that needs to get out there. And that's why I wanted to do this video. It's a huge part of my life. It's one of the best decisions that I've ever made, moving abroad, both times. Yeah, if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.